Yes, teaching fellow in art history.
Well, hello. Thank you for having me today. I'm Francesca ALBREZZI. I'm part of the World Arts and Culture department at graduate student. And I'm also part of the graduate certificate program in the Center for Digital Humanities. So I'm kind of cross-campus. And I wanted to talk today about the opportunity that I had to build a digital art history kind of 101 textbook online. Was based on 2 summer institutes that we had here at UCLA that I also got to work on with Professor Miriam Postner. She's the coordinator here for the DH program. And also with a star-studded cast of faculty members such as Lisa Snyder, Johanna Drucker, Todd Pressner, Steve Nelson. So we came together over the summers for about a week and a half with about 12 participants. And it was an introductory session to conducting digital art historical research and really kind of the hands-on basics of what you would need to start a digital art history project. So we got so good at this by the second year that we ended up saving quite a bit on our budget and asked for a grant extension. These were funded through the Getty Foundation. And so we asked for a grant extension to fund this website building to aggregate our resources based on the 2 summer institutes. So as I said, the goal of the website was to organize, edit, and arrange our set of resources for a wider use. And maybe it's best if I just kind of hop into the website itself. So this is the Digital Art History 101 website. It's very straightforward, very plain, but really there's a lot here. So what we did was we took the topics that were central to the institutes, which included an introduction and overview to both DH and DAH, and then also 5 other topics, so scoping out and structuring your work for a project, information visualization, maps and space, 3D and modeling work, as well as pedagogy and what you would do after you put together kind of the basics for a presentation or for a DH project. And what we found is that, let me see if I can switch over. I'm trying to bring up the Thank you. Okay, thanks so much. So this is an example of this is the actual website. Here we are. So you can scroll up. This is what I was looking for. So this is the website, and you can see we've got the nav at the top that are those major topics that I was just telling you about. And then each section is divided into readings, resources, tutorials, tools, and projects. And we found that this was the kind of thing that we had gathered for each of the core topics, and we wanted to share. So, see if I can now go back. Okay. We chose to build this website in Jekyll for a few reasons, and I had never worked with Jekyll before, but it offers stability, longevity, and because we were hosting it through GitHub, community contributions. That's what was really important to us, that this resource could be built on. So it's a static website generator, which means that it doesn't have to dynamically retrieve from a database, and therefore it's supposed to be more stable, right? Less open to hacking necessarily or hopefully, and that was really important to us for preservation purposes. So the other thing was that it was going to be hosted on GitHub, which is a web-based platform, and this would allow for version control as well as for people to add to the resource. So I wanted to tell a little bit about my process and how I went about doing this under the guidance of Miriam Posner. So I never worked with Jekyll before. Like I said, I had done I can build a website in WordPress like that. That would look probably a lot more aesthetically pleasing than the one that we came up with, but the point was to learn a new tool. So I learned Jekyll through lynda.com, and I used Pandoc, which is a conversion tool, to take the HTML out of the websites that we had previously built in WordPress for the 2 summer institutes and convert those to docs. From there, I created an aggregation of all that information in a Google Doc, and that way I could send it around to all the faculty members, let them add what they thought, organize things, get all the fonts kind of in the right order. And then I used Pandoc again to take that doc format and convert it to Markdown, which is what Jekyll builds its pages with in many cases. So the other great thing about Jekyll is that it works on templates, and so once I took the time to create a template, it was very easy for me to then build out the various other pages by dropping in my content. So it was really straightforward in that way. From there, I would push to GitHub, so to make the site live. It was all living on my own hard drive, and then I would push it to GitHub, which made it live and available to others. And arranged with the CDH here to get a custom URL so that we could share it with the world. At least that's how it was supposed to go. So I'm taking a bit of a lessons learned approach to this talk today. As you can see over here on the side, this is actually from my Instagram. After a few weeks of struggle, I was able to finally get the site to work. And I want to talk about the way that things fell apart in various portions of this process. So first and foremost, tutorials aren't perfect. That picture that I just showed of me finally succeeding in getting the very, very basic structure of the website up and running was due to the fact that the Lynda tutorial had an error by the gentleman who was giving it in his own coding when he was talking in the video, but his final code was perfect. But it took me a little while to figure out why my code, having followed the video, wasn't working, and I eventually had to go line by line by line, which I'm sure some of you have been through that process. It's tedious, but it's really, really worthwhile, and was able to solve it after a few weeks. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is linking versus hosting. So I made the decision that because the WordPress sites were hosted here through the CDH, they were pretty stable, they were going to be here for a while, and so I decided, well, in order to do this within a good amount of time, let's just link to those sources so people would also see the context of where these resources were coming from. Well, this is why you need to check with your sysadmin and keep on top of your resources, because unfortunately those sites hadn't been looked at in a while, and so their security settings were out of date and they got hacked. So a majority of our current resources that are now on the site are just dead links. They don't go anywhere, which was really frustrating. But at the time, it was a great way to build this site really quickly. So there's a difference between linking to a resource, which can give great context, but also hosting things yourself and going that extra mile to really make sure that you've got everything that you need and you're hosting it yourself. And then this led me to ask the question, how can organizational infrastructures better serve preservation? I think making sure that these websites are maintained is a lot to ask of the Center for Digital Humanities or organizations when there's so many websites that we're building, but they're also essential when we're building on top of them. So how do we manage that? So finally, I'll just close with that I'm attempting to put Humpty Dumpty back together again now in my free time. And I think this is the most important thing, is that there's a few key resources that I'm finding that are helping me do this. One is the Wayback Machine. I think most of you are probably familiar with it, but if you're not, it's great. It basically any kind of web page that the crawlers have gone out and saved, you can find there. And it's helped me find a few of the lost pages of the websites. So that's been really nice, and I can use that to help kind of reconstruct some of the data that was lost. Also, documentation. I actually started as an interim project manager at the Getty Research Institute a while ago, served there for 4 years. And I learned that documenting your work and your process is essential because of things like this, because of the unforeseen circumstances. And if you've had a record, you can go back to it and rebuild from it, which is really useful. And finally, your emails and communication are another place to always check for that. And also reaching out to your network to rebuild resources. I really am grateful to those who are in touch and that I know that I can reach out to help me rebuild this resource. So the network people are always, I think, the thing that makes everything run. So with that, I will say thank you, and if you have any questions, please let me know.
All right. This sort of echoes on what Mark was saying about how he hosts outside of his university resource and precarity. And I was in a precarious position for 6 years after I got my PhD, and I think that I say this to all of my graduate students because I especially teach library science now, and they're only in grad school for 2 years, is get yourself a domain name, right? Reclaim hosting, it's like $30 a year, and they work with academics, and then that way you have this independent control that you might not have otherwise, and it means that also should you change locations/institutions, you won't lose everything. When I left UCSB, I lost everything because I didn't migrate it correctly. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
We use Reclaim Hosting in the DH 101 class that I've TA'd with Miriam for the past 3 years, and it's a great resource. And we work to migrate over a static version of those sites for students after within the year, because they get to choose whether or not they want to renew their license with Reclaim. But I think it's a really important thing to host yourself as much as possible if there is an institutional support.
Comments or questions? All right, great. Nothing online. Nope. Okay. Thank you very much.